Policy Project and Iowa Fiscal have combined, along with other groups. What other groups again, David?
Oh, it was the Child and Family Policy Center.
Child and Family Policy Center. Was that funded by the state or not?
No, no. I think they might have one grant to evaluate some state, but mainly it's old dead rich guys that fund us all.
Well, we appreciate them. There's other old dead rich guys. Well, I shouldn't say old dead rich guys, but old rich guys who think that children should get out in the fields and work. I mean, it didn't hurt their grandparents, so get out there. And while you're having a break there, you might as well do some push-ups.
I don't think those guys fund things, though. I think
no, they don't. No, they don't fund, but they remind us to work harder.
Yeah,
really appreciate it. Get out there and work harder for me. The old union guy's coming out of me. Sorry. I understand now that, of course, David's big thing is climate change. It always has been. He's been a long-time climate activist, and he once ran for the Democratic Party nomination as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate race against Chuck Grassley. And his concern then was the quality of water in our rivers, which was really no quality at all. But anyway, I just wanted to throw out a few bona fides in case you're just tuning in for the first time and have never heard David before. But I saw on the front page of the Des Moines Register yesterday, Des Moines Register, or as I like to call it, Pravda, the Des Moines Register told us that according to Mid-American, that our natural gas bills will go up 46% next year. Well, in just a couple of months here. During the coldest months of the year, we'll see a considerable increase in our gas bill. So what do you and your environmentalist friends have to say for yourself?
Well, yes. I mean, this is not the environmentalists that are doing it. This is raw capitalism.
Raw capitalism?
That's right. The natural gas, it's a market. And right now, the price has gone up. And that's the reason, it's one of the reasons you want to invest in wind power and solar power and not natural gas, because you cannot know what the price is going to be. And this is not, the dead hand of government regulation. It's the fact that they can get more money, so they're going to ask for more money.
Yeah, well, they're going to ask for that much, but it's a game they play at the state. They're going to, the state's going to lowball them. They're going to come back at 45% or whatever. And they always play this game. It's so tiresome. They're saying 46% increase. So that way we won't feel bad about a 30% increase. A third is better than 46%, apparently. It's the same hustle every year. And politicians of both parties will come back to us and say, we held your utility bills down. I must be getting, I'm beyond cynical. I must be ready to retire or something the way I'm talking here.
Oh, you've always been cynical, though, even when you were young. So what's the point in retiring?
Good point. I came from a cynical family. I think we're all, I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, but what is related to this, and this will be the front page. I didn't swear where it was on the Des Moines Register today, but yesterday, this big group of people who teach about climate change and research about climate change put out a statement, right, on climate change and something. This is the 11th of these. So every year it's climate change and the effect on agriculture, climate change and flooding, climate change and public health. This one is climate change and strengthening the electric infrastructure. So strengthening the electric grid. That's what it is this time.
Okay.
And this is how it works. I've been part of this for a long time. There are about a dozen of us who do this every year. I've been doing it the last 10 years. And you come up with, well, what can we say about climate change that's happening right now in Iowa? Have that discussion. 3 or 4 people then decide to go write something on it. We look at it. And then when we get it right, we send it out to see other people who might endorse this. It has to be one page. which is really hard for an academic to do anything on one page. But it's a one page. It goes out. People look at it. They make suggestions, and at the end, you're going to get something over 200 people at colleges and universities, all in Iowa. And there were this year 230 some professors, and at 34 different colleges and universities. So it's not just Iowa and Iowa State, although a lot of the people come from those. But like there were 3 from Cornell College, and 3 from Central College, and 2 from Dordt, and Western, Community College, and Des Moines. All of the colleges and universities in Iowa have people from those different colleges have a chance to weigh in on this and decide if they want to be an endorser. So what we're showing is that climate change is not, somebody from Berkeley or somebody from, Harvard saying something. It's people right here in the state of Iowa who you might know are saying, look out, climate change is coming. Here's one aspect of it we should pay attention to. And generally, this is what we should be doing right now, because there is no doubt things are going to get worse in terms of bad weather, floods, windstorms, those kinds of things.
Yikes. Derechos and stuff? Because I never heard of a derecho until a couple of years ago.
No, none of us did. No, I mean, they'd happen once in a while, but they'd be real local. And then this one that was, 75 miles wide and starts in South Dakota and ends up in, someplace in Illinois.
Yeah.
I mean, this is serious. But the point is that because we have warmed the atmosphere so much, these are now more likely. And we're going to have to learn some new words.
Like derecho?
You like derecho.
I don't want to learn that word. I didn't want to learn it in the first place.
So this is the idea behind this is to demonstrate that people who teach at your colleges and universities here in the state of Iowa recognize climate change as a reality and are making some suggestions about how we might be able to do things better so the effects aren't so bad. But mainly what we say every year is more wind, more solar. You gotta get rid of natural gas, especially because of the price increases, and coal, and go with a different way of making energy so we can continue to use it.
You have solar panels, right, in your home?
I do, yeah. I've had it for a long time.
Do you have gas at all, or do you have?
Sure.
You still have the natural gas?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, what you do is it's just supplemental.
Yeah.
And we have pretty good policy in the state of Iowa, not because of Mid-American, who've been fighting in this forever, but when I'm giving them a few extra kilowatt hours, and that can only happen in the middle of the hot day in the summer, because that's the only time I'm making more power than I use in my house, I'm giving them incredibly beneficial, high-priced kilowatt hours back just when they need them. So
how do they store that sort of thing? I never knew how you stored.
You don't store it. You store it on the grid. It's just another production place someplace on the grid. Right now, there's some gnome someplace in a little room looking at all the power plants that are producing electricity and calling on one of them one after another and going the cheapest ones, next cheapest one, the next cheapest one, in order to keep the amount of electricity there for the demand. I mean, there's some power plants out here, generally called natural gas peaking plants.
Mm-hmm.
And there are more than 8,000 hours in a year. If you think about it, 24
Sure.
times 3. So more than 8,000 hours. Some of these power plants run for 100 hours. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And they're there just to kick in when you really need the power. Well, that's why you don't have to have storage, because you always have another plant to call on. And unless something happens in Texas where they don't, they just don't didn't figure out that, wow, natural gas lines might freeze.
Might freeze. Yes, they might.
Geez, I mean, what stupidity down there.
Well, they
We don't do that up here because we know that things might freeze.
I was going to say, now I spent a little time in Texas, and those folks in a lot of places in the South really don't understand the concept of freezing.
Yeah, they do not.
And they don't understand ice on the roads. I mean, every time there's an icy road, if you're down south somewhere, there's cars in the ditch everywhere. I mean, they just don't get it. You know, we up here in the upper frozen plains, we know how to negotiate, but
Well, it makes us feel superior to those poor guys, doesn't it?
oh yeah. Well, I feel superior anyway. So
yeah. So anyway, this climate statement just came out yesterday. It's going to be all over the newspapers. It's already all over the newspapers, and on radio. I don't think we got any well, it's hard to get TV for four guys to stand up and say, draw on something. You know, it's not photographic, but we get a lot of publicity on this. And again, it points out climate change is real. We got to do something about it. And Iowa has been getting after it with all its wind power. We need to do more with solar. And when we do that, farmers make money. Always have to put that last part in because it's true.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've never really doubted it, even when you were here arguing with Bill Horan over the dead zone. Of course, Bill wanted to call it the hypoxia zone and on and on and on. But so what can we do again? And I've asked you this probably 15 times over the years. What would you suggest as a starting place?
Okay, I'd start with more wind, more solar, more electric cars, all of those things. And that's to try to stop the problem. And what you do now when the next derecho hits and I lose my electricity for 5 solid days like I did, you need to figure out ways that you can get essential services taken care of. And you do that through things called microgrids. So around the fire department, that'd be a good place to make sure that you always are going to have power, or a hospital, or maybe a grocery store. So when the grid goes down, the power goes down, they're not going to get it to you because all their lines are flat, in a field someplace. You can have your own little electric system. And then you power that. You have a big storage battery. And then you also power it with something. And I'd like to power it with solar. Because solar plus storage is going to allow you to get the essential electricity that you need. You can dim the lights in the grocery store. That's fine. But boy, you sure don't want to dim what's going into refrigeration because you got to have that. So you don't need all the power you would need in a normal day, but you need some of that power. Microgrids are a great idea. So that's one of the suggestions that this report is making.
Can we do that with raw capitalism, as you would describe a Darwinian capitalism?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you have to have the incentives right. But
and
sure,
the incentives would come from government, or
they probably would. Yeah. Right now, the incentives are that when I put more solar panels on my roof, I get a tax credit from the federal government of 26%. That's a good public policy. That's the way you make capitalism work a little better.
Well, the real secret is we're really not capitalists, especially in Iowa. But everybody goes crazy when I start talking about that. But
right.
If our one of the functions of government is to keep capitalism or the appearance of capitalism functioning.
Right.
So I'm thinking that it shouldn't be hard to come up with some ideas as how to do these mini grids that you're talking about. I suppose the opposition is the opposition that comes from using ethanol at all. It comes from the oil and gas industry who don't want this to happen.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you'd find. And again, the city would have to invest in that. And but by doing solar, they'd be replacing other electricity in normal times.
Right.
But they'd have the capacity that, you got to keep that battery full all the time, that when everything goes to hell and everything closes down, then you got that power to keep things going. Even to charge cell phones. I mean, having a place where people can come and get their cell phone charged up would be an important thing to have happen during those derechos. And again, we saw it here in eastern Iowa. 5 days of no power for me, and it was much longer for some people in Cedar Rapids. You gotta do some. You gotta do something about it. And generally, when we think about military preparedness and trying to be ready for disasters, we don't care what it costs, right?
Right.
So you can spend a little more money than you normally would, but you got those things because, boy, grocery stores, the fire department, hospitals, they've got to have power all the time. And microgrids would be one of the ways of doing that. And that's one of the things mentioned in this report. And, the main guy this year was from Iowa State University, and he's an engineer, James McCauley. And so he's a person who studies the electric grid and knows about costs and benefits and what you can do. Sometimes you want to put those lines underground so they don't get knocked down. On the other hand, that's real expensive.
Oh, yeah.
You got to figure out where it is essential and where it's not. But that's how you become more prepared for the disasters that we have caused by putting so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We have done it. We should stop doing it. But even if we stop right now, we're still going to have more flooding than we did in, say, 1950 or 1960. It's a different regime.
Well, I'll tell you, we're awful guilty here lately. I didn't know I was a racist until fairly recently. I didn't know my grandparents were, my great grandparents, but now they are. And now I'm destroying the planet. I just have been making a lot of mistakes lately.
Well, just stop it. Just stop it and go ahead and let people make some money. Let farmers do well.
I'm all set for that. And I would remind everyone that 27% of the ethanol in the United States comes from Iowa.
It does.
And we have 43 biofuels plants in Iowa.
Oh, that's just ethanol. No, we have about another 10 for
biodiesel?
Soybeans. Yeah.
Oh, soybeans.
Yeah, we got more.
Yeah, I think now, you're right. It's that many for just ethanol plants. So it's a big business in our state. So no wonder we haven't seen Joe Biden around lately.
Yeah, well, what you want to see is this. I mean, people are starting to worry about electric cars, but we ought to have electric cars. And we also ought to figure out ways
JakeFortDodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
Well, that's right, JMike1400. You can go there on Twitter at JMike1400. And certainly you can see as well as hear what happens in the studio by going to YourFortDodge.com. We're streaming there. Or you can go to the Facebook page, AM1400 KVFT. We're streaming there, of course. And to my personal Facebook page, Michael Devine, Devine, if you would like to see and hear what happens in the studio or get a peek at the studio that I've been in for many years now. Right over my head is a UNI poster, a University of Northern Iowa Panthers poster, and it's there because we've been carrying the Panther games for quite some time. And, of course, over to our sister station, KWMT, they've been playing they have been running the Iowa State Cyclone games, football and basketball for a long, long time. I think Matt Campbell and his crew were taking on the Kansas State Wildcats. No, Kansas Wildcats, the University of Kansas Wildcats. It's K-State Jayhawks, right? If that's wrong, give me a call at 955-1400. The Kansas schools, or Kansas State anyway, is a big favorite of Nevin Mulholland's, and he and Randy Kuhlman will be in here tomorrow to talk sports. It's one of the highlights of the week on this show anyway, is when Nevin and Randy are here, and I get to inform them once again on sports. Speaking of sports, as Howard Cosell used to say a long time ago, Mark Ryle has been hired as an assistant wrestling coach. Mark Ryle was a great wrestler back in the day. Oh, it's got to be early 90s, I think would have been his time. But he was a great one. He was a two-time state champ. I never had the pleasure of meeting Mark Ryle, but I've met a lot of members of his family. There's a lot of Ryles around. And I know Pat Ryle, probably his younger brother, was a couple of years older than my son when he was in school. And all these guys are pushing 40 or over 40. Mark Ryle's got to be in his 40s by now. But I certainly enjoyed watching him wrestle, and a lot of great Fort Dodge wrestlers over the many, many years. And we have a great wrestling tradition that maybe sagged for a while, but Bobby Thompson's got him back out there and kicking. I got to get Bobby Thompson in here. I don't think I got him in here before the season last year. But let's not forget we got a lot of great Fort Dodge wrestlers over at the University of Northern Iowa right now. Brody Teskey is over there, of course, and I think Tristan Lara is still in school. Or if Tristan Lara isn't still in school, his younger brother is, I'm sure, Cade. So yeah, we got a real strong Fort Dodge connection there with those guys. Good afternoon. You're on the air. How wrong am I today?
What's that?
How wrong am I today?
Well, you're getting pretty long, but I tell you, it's the Scrapster.
The Scrapster!
You know what, Mike? David Osterberg, I just about jumped in front of my combine and killed myself. What a frickin' piece of work. Let me tell you something.
All right.
To blame this natural gas thing on capitalism, for crying out loud. We had more natural gas than we knew what to do with, Mike, 2 years ago. And now, because we had to get rid of fracking, and we've destroyed the oil fields, we've shut them down, and and so then he talks about Texas, and he forgot to mention the windmills froze up, the solar panels froze over, and he wants to blame it on the pipeline. Give me a break. That guy, Mike, and this is, so here's the serious part. No matter where I go, people ask me, Mike, what are we going to do we got to get the country back on track. And I said, the only thing we can do is we got to make sure everybody goes to the polls in 2022.
Yeah.
And they said, well, who would vote for people that support Biden? Because everybody's blaming Biden, and they should, because this is all his fault, Mike. But David Osterberg, if you asked him, I'm sure he would tell you that the Afghanistan deal, everything was right on that, and everything, and the vaccine mandate and the mask. David Osterberg would tell you that Biden hasn't done anything wrong. And so here's the scary part, Mike. there is a ton of people, just like David Osterberg out there, that think that Joe Biden and AOC and all her little cronies are taking this country in exactly the direction they want to take it.
Mike,
And
Mike, we got to get you back on the air regularly. I'll tell you,
Well, I am so wound up right now listening to that guy. And Mike, so the Green New Deal, we're paying for it right now. You just talked about you're paying more for $1 a gallon. Mike, that's a tax. You're paying an extra $1. It's a tax to move away from petroleum products, fossil fuels, to the Green New Deal. You're paying $1 on every gallon. You're paying a tax. This winter, when we start paying our utility bills, ordinary Iowans like you and I are going to start paying that extra money. And don't kid yourself, that's a tax. That's a tax to pay for the Green New Deal.
Yeah. Is it purely a tax, do you think?
Do what?
Is it purely a tax? All that extra money is going to a tax?
No, Mike, it's not a tax, but we're paying that extra money because of what they're doing. Biden closing down the oil fields and closing down the XL pipeline. That's what's making these prices go up. And so, in my opinion, when you want to do those things and the prices goes up, that's a tax.
Well, Mike, David Osterberg also says if we don't do something, of course, we're going to have a lot of derechos, flooding, all these sorts of things. Do you believe that or not?
Oh, okay. I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. Mike, do you think the sun burns at the same temperature every day, every year? It doesn't. What caused the ice age? The sun cycles, Mike. This is proven. The sun cycles. The sun gets hot. I mean, it's over 100 or 200 years, this big old sun cycle, but it gets really hot, and then it goes into a cycle where it cools off. That's what caused the ice age. That sun can do more than we would ever do in a million years running my combine in the field, burning diesel fuel. And I just listening to, I'm so beside my, so here's another thing. So the only thing I think he was right on, Mike, is he was right on the natural gas on the power plants. And so he is right. We've got all this solar and all this wind energy going onto the grid. And he's right. You can't store that. So when there is a shortage in the grid, then these natural gas power lines, they have to kick on because we got to keep the grid full in order to not have a brownout. That's what happens in California. And so we had the Duane Arnold power plant was nuclear, the best source of clean, reliable energy. And we had to shut that down, Mike, because a nuclear power plant, you can't raise up the output or lower the output. It has to be constant. And so now all of our power plants now have to be where we can raise and lower the output so we can fill in for the solar and the wind. And when we start shutting down these coal and natural gas power plants and we rely only on solar and wind, well, we're going to have fun then, because that's what happened in Texas.
Well, you probably didn't know this, but my son has worked down at the Duane Arnold Energy Plant, nuclear plant, for, 10, 12, 13 years, something like that. And yeah, they are closing it down. What was the specific reason that had to close?
Because they couldn't sell. So energy is a commodity, Mike, and
right.
So when it's a peak during the hot part of the day, energy is worth more, and then at night when everybody goes to bed, we don't use energy, and so it goes down. Well, these natural gas and coal power plants, they can do that. They can during the day they can have more output, and at night they can slow their output down. The nuclear power plant couldn't do that, Mike. It can only have, I'm not an engineer, but say it has 1 trillion kilowatts of power, which probably is way too high, but it can't slow that down, Mike. It's just always putting that out in this morning, tonight. It's always the same. And so they're losing money because they can't slow it down at night, because you can't slow down the nuclear. I'm talking way over my knowledge level here, but the gist is that the output is always the same, and so they were losing money, and so they have to shut it down because they're losing money on it.
Outlived its use, I suppose.
But and so here we are as Americans, getting rid of coal, beating up on natural gas, and China is running all over. China itself building coal-powered plants, and they're going all over the world. They're going to India. They're coming to South America with their technology to build coal-powered plants, and you and I are paying $1 more for fuel, $1 more for diesel. We're going to pay way more for natural gas. And it just, none of it makes sense, Mike, and it's very frustrating for me to sit out here in this combine and listen to somebody like David Osterberg spew out his stuff.
Well, I had Tim Kreinbrink on yesterday. You missed that, I suppose.
Well, I did miss that because we couldn't go to the field yesterday because of the rain.
The rain, right.
And I had a tractor break down, so we ended up hauling it up to the shop, and we're combining corn now, but I've got a flat tire on one of my duals on the combine, so I'm waiting for the guys to show up to get that thing fixed. If it's not one thing, it's another.
It's always something. Yeah, it's always something. But how's your yield out there?
I'm in a cornfield right now, and the corn is outstanding, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
It goes most of the time. The monitor runs at 220, but it'll go up to 260 or 270. And I had an 80-acre field that went completely across the scale, which means it all went to the elevator and it all got weighed. They averaged 66 bushels to the acre across the scale, which I've never, on that 80, I've never raised that good of beans ever before. So
66 bushels to an acre for beans?
Yeah, exact. Yes.
Well,
and that was the whole field. So in that field, there were places where the monitor would go, up to 85 or 88.
Right.
So, but then, like every field, you've got spots that, are not very productive.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, I want to thank you for allowing me this time to vent my frustration, and now that I've talked it out, I feel much better. I'm not gonna jump in front of my combine.
Yeah,
anymore.
that's a terrible way to go, Mike. Don't do that.
That would be a terrible. I remember one time when Dad was running the combine, and I was running the auger wagon, and it was at night, and a raccoon, for some reason, I suppose it was the lights, decided to run right into one of the rows and got wrapped up into the knives and the snapping rollers, and it was just, you can about imagine what it was quite a mess.
Yeah, it kind of was. I don't think people in Iowa yet have grasped the seriousness of this green technology. I know you got to get back to work, but we kind of live and die out here by ethanol, corn ethanol. Now, if the Biden administration does away with or starts taking big chunks out of corn ethanol, that hurts us. That's going to hurt us bad. And I don't mean just the farmers. I mean all the people that work on the corn ethanol plants or biodiesel plants, all those places and the communities they serve. That'll be a disaster for us.
Oh, Mike, it's all the byproducts that go into cattle and hog feed. that get shipped out to California. The dry distillers get put on train cars, go to California to the dairy. So your meat's going to go up, your milk's going to go up. And so he was talking about those micro, whatever you call them, little areas where they could generate their own electricity. One of the concerns that the RECs have is that as we move to these electric cars, Mike, our grids in our communities are not built to do that. So when you take a cul-de-sac in Fort Dodge, and all of a sudden, let's say there's 20 homes in that cul-de-sac, and all of a sudden 5 of those homes decide to buy electric cars, and they all come home at 5:30 at the end of the day, and they plug those things in at the same time, Mike. That's not going to work. That will put a strain on the power grid for that little cul-de-sac that it's gonna, they're gonna have to rebuild it. So who's gonna pay for that? Does everybody on the cul-de-sac gonna have to pay for that, or just the 5 people that have the electric cars that are causing the problem?
I do notice the Democratic Party is silent on the issue of ethanol, and they have been for a long time. They keep wanting to talk about COVID because they beat Trump with COVID, and they think they're going to do it with Kim Reynolds. But I see dark days ahead for the Democratic Party because their leadership in Washington, D.C. is going to sink them. How many more times can we hear about the wonders of transgender surgery and all these other things they seem to be concerned about, or let's hold your kids down and give them an injection, whether you like it or not? I mean, are these winning parts or points that they want to run on? I can't believe that.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike. It is a mess. And this whole, we're all hearing about the shortage, being able to get the cargo containers.
Yeah.
So here's the other thing that I saw and read, Mike, is the day, I think, so the federal mandate for federal employees to be vaccinated or get fired is the day before Thanksgiving or the day after. The flight or the security people for the airport, what's that acronym?
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about, though. Everybody else does too.
Yeah, the security people, only 40% of those people have been vaccinated.
Really?
And so the day before, the day after Thanksgiving, you're going to lose 60% of the people that monitor, that take care of when we get on the planes, when you go through the check line. My advice to people is I would not want to be flying because I think it's going to be a disaster, Mike. And it's the same thing with trucking companies, the same thing with the railroad.
voice of Ford Dodge. Good afternoon. You're on the air. What do you got to say today? Hello. Hello. Voice of Ford Dodge. Good afternoon. You're on the air. What do you got to say today? Hello, 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 hello. Anybody there? I could have swore I hear some kind of car driving, but I guess if he wants to talk about it, he'll come back.
We all know how big of a problem corn rootworm is around here.
clinical studies. Don't rely on non-contact thermometers. They have no scientific studies behind them and can miss the fever that might mean COVID. Learn more at Exergen.com.
Michael Devine, broadcasting live.
That's right. I'm broadcasting live. When I have my microphone on, I'm broadcasting live. We're broadcasting from the Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters studio at 612 South 32nd Street here in Fort Dodge. You may contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6481 or online at www.fdwater.com. Well, we've had an interesting afternoon. I started out in a very reasonable way by saying the Democrats are destroying Western civilization and want to destroy the whole idea of white identity. Now, I didn't really, all my life, I have not thought of myself as a white person. I thought of myself as a man, period, end of story. But apparently, in this new universe that we inhabit, everyone is judged by the color of their skin. At least white people are, I should say. Writing in Slate magazine in the year 2020, a writer by the name of Sophie Hagney claimed that museums have a docent problem. Now, docents are usually older ladies who will lead visitors around a major art gallery and explain the artworks to them, who the artist was, what the painting represents, a real thorough history. According to Ms. Hagney, docents skew toward a certain demographic. Dun, 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 dun. Docents, the little old ladies that lead guests around. And by the way, they've had a lot of training, the docents, and they love their work. And here's another kicker. They do the work for free. Free labor, ladies and gentlemen. So a lot of institutions, like the Art Institute of Chicago, have decided that they're going to do away with their all older white woman docent workers who are volunteering their time to do this work in favor of a small, more inclusive group of docents who will be paid. So the fact that these older women are just doing this as a labor of love makes no difference. What is relevant is the color of their skin. We cannot have a bunch of white people doing these free jobs. God. The Art Institute of Chicago is eliminating its entire 122-person army of volunteers. These volunteers. Why would they do that? The official explanation, according to Commentary Magazine, was that the museum decided to replace them with a smaller group of paid guides. But the real impetus was the optics. Oh, God, here come the optics again. The real impetus was the optics of having a largely older white female group of volunteers guiding patrons through the institution that had recently committed itself to an aggressive diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. When are we going to have enough of this sort of stuff? When are we going to stand up and say, this is nonsense? This is nonsense. Now, you'll have to say the conservatives aren't behind this sort of nonsense. It would be the liberals or the leftists, as expressed currently in the Democratic Party. A lot of older workers who were union members years ago don't want to admit that. But the party doesn't care about them anymore and hasn't for years and years and years. You know it, and I know it. I know there's still crazy loyalty with some union leadership to the Democratic Party. Where else are they going to go, obviously? But the Democratic Party, unless you're a public worker, is not going to do a damn thing for you. Getting back to the docents at the, by the way, I was unfamiliar with the term docent. But in a September third letter to the docents of the Art Institute of Chicago that did away with a 60-year-old program, the program itself of enjoying free labor from older white women. Miss Victoria Stein wrote, as a civic institution, oh God, I love it when these people talk this way. As a civic institution, we acknowledge our responsibility to build the volunteer educator program in a way that allows community members of all income levels to participate and responds to issues of class and income equity and does not require financial flexibility to support. Financial flexibility? In other words, because the volunteers happen to be people who could afford to give their time without payment, who volunteered their time for free, and not enough non-white people volunteered to serve, the program had to be destroyed, and it was. The Chicago Tribune, not a conservative newspaper, was so incensed by Stein's decision that it published an editorial whose title speaks for itself. Shame on the Art Institution, or the Art Institute, for summarily canning its volunteer docents. Actually, Miss Stein should be fired forthwith and be banned from the company of decent people everywhere. Because I want to tell you something. Miss Stein here is not a decent human being. She's a frightened human being or an arrogant human being. Closer to just narcissistic human being. I'm sure somewhere, well, she'll go to the next Democratic Party meeting and probably be applauded for firing a bunch of free labor from a bunch of older white women. It's just amazing the crap we put up with. Just think of how far we've come in 10 years. Our culture is now rabidly hostile to white people. Rabidly hostile. John Gruden, please. It was all over ESPN and still is all over ESPN that 10 years ago, John Gruden used some racial slurs. Oh, no. And then we had this parade of old white people, owners and coaches, blah, blah, blah. John Gruden shouldn't have done that. Well, you know, we have a high level of accountability there. I hope that the New York Times, and this is the New York Times is the blowtorch of the cancel movement. They got Bill O'Reilly, they got Steve King, they got a lot of people. But the New York Times is really behind this. They searched John Gruden's emails. I think they just started with Gruden, or maybe they got a tip about him. They researched John Gruden's emails. And sure enough, in all those thousands and thousands of emails, they found a couple where Gruden was making racial slurs. So Gruden had to go. Gruden just had to go. But as I was looking at some of these older white male coaches and some of the owners go on and on and on about accountability, and they were shocked that John Gruden would talk this way, I'm thinking to myself, you no good SOBs. I've been in the company of people like you in the not too distant past, and you, yes, you country club Republicans, you have used racial slurs. Yes, you effete liberals in the Democratic Party. You have used racial slurs. But you caught old John doing it, and it was pious time. It was time to put on the crown of the Pope of Rome, of the Vicar of Christ, and proclaim yourself his judge. And you, John Gruden, have been sentenced to permanent exile by men who no doubt were more racist than John Gruden ever was. That's the type of damaging, outrageous hypocrisy we're seeing. By the way, a teacher in a Texas high school has resigned after he was filmed using a racial slur and questioning why there was no White History Month in class. In a press conference held outside Klein Collins High School, Parents gathered alongside Quanell X. You know a lot of guys by the name of Quanell X, don't you? A new Black Panther Nation leader to exorciate the educator. Mr. X said the man he identified as a theater teacher, referred to by students as Mr. G, had repeatedly made vile, repugnant, insensitive, and oh no, disrespectful statements while teaching. This is from Quanell X. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if your last name is X, you probably have been inspired by the Black Muslims, what used to be called the Black Muslims, and is now called the Nation of Islam. The Louis Farrakhan group. Remember what X stood for? That was canceling his slave name. And the X that he goes for by now, I'm assuming, the X that he goes by now is the last name he will keep until he is given an actual name by the leader of the Nation of Islam, who I'm going to assume is still Louis Farrakhan. Why would he give that gig up? I mean, he lives in a mansion in Chicago. So this is the type of person who's canceling out this theater teacher. Now, if the teacher made these remarks, and I don't know what they are, other than why isn't there a White History Month, which is kind of clueless. The video of the teacher was reportedly taken a week before the district took any action. Klein School District said in a statement referring to the teacher as former employee, apologized for the incident and said it was still under investigation. Your word, sir, was absolutely offensive, said Mr. X during the conference. I don't know if Mr. X is. How would you address some guy with a last name of X? I don't know. And I wonder what Quanell X does for an actual living. There's a picture of him here. And yeah, I have no idea. What do you suppose somebody... We never get the backstory on the accuser. We know this high school teacher, and apparently the high school teacher is not the brightest guy in the world to be going around making these remarks. I have no idea what the real remarks were. This article in Daily Beast doesn't tell us. Other than, why aren't we having White History Month? Which is really an expression of frustration with the cowardly way the school districts around the country are handling these sorts of things. Is racial identity, collectivist racial identity, is that really where we're at now? Is this really what we want? Is the demand that we all be lumped in as black people or white people or Asians or Hispanics? No individual identity. All white people are apparently alike. They're racist. Just racist, and they've been racist all the way back to 1619, maybe before. So every white person you're going to see today is racist, or enjoys the position that they do, and it might be a modest position. Maybe you just have a little 3-bedroom ranch-style house with a double garage. You got that because of racism. Are we going to let our children be taught this sort of thing? Because it's a lie. The idea that all black people think alike, that is grossly offensive. The idea that all white people or any type of people think alike is offensive, grossly offensive, and it's un-American. We need to talk with these people come the next election.
Michael Devine at AM 1400 KVFD, banging Monday through Friday from 2 to 5.
It's 429.
Attorney Joe Cordell.
New school, new job, new home. Change is hard and can leave you feeling isolated, and divorce delivers one of life's hardest blows.
Ago, and I had a bottle of boot black. Basically, it's like paint, and of course I spilled it with the cap off out of my locker onto the floor. And I'm like, man, this is going to be a mess. It's a puddle. It's going to be stained. I'm going to have to deal with one of these drill sergeants. So I'm walking down the hall, and some of the fellas are down in the end of the hall, and they're using the floor buffer. And I said, hey, when you guys are done, will you let me know, because I need to use this. I need to get it cleaned up before it sets. And one of the guys, he says, what's with this boot black down the front of your chest and stuff? And I said, well, I was listening to some Nina Simone, and I think some of the white started to fall off.
What?
So these leftists, man, they are crazy. And I will avoid using the term that I was going to use. They are absolutely nuts. They are so convinced of their own self-righteousness, their own smug self-righteousness, they will pull the whole system down on top of them, on top of everyone.
Well, I've often said that they hate our country, and they do. They think our country is so racist and so dominated by evil white men that the country needs to be reduced to rubble. Our children re-educated, sent to re-education camps, also known as the local school district. I mean, that's what our society would look like. Your children would be sent to school and taught what the hell they want those children to learn, and turn them out as nothing but blank slates for them to fill in their own identity. This is what our fathers fought against, this sort of totalitarian fascist thought. That's what this is. It's nothing else. It's not about racial justice. It's not about inclusivity. It's about authoritarian behavior. And that's what's going on. I'm shocked by it. I'm
not shocked. Actually, I'm on several email lists one of the companies I used to work for. I'm still on their email list. I got an email from them that threw out something called Hanlon's razor. Hanlon's razor is a Latin phrase. I can't recall exactly what it is, but essentially Hanlon's razor says, do not attribute to evil what can be attributed to ignorance. These people aren't necessarily evil. They're stupid, short-sighted. They have a singular perception. You know, somebody might indict the conservatives, or somebody might indict the Christians. More of them, and I won't say all of them, but more of them have at least a moment's pause. They are encouraged to have some semblance of reflection. They're encouraged to ask at least some question of themselves and their organizations. The leftists, they don't have that.
No.
And there was I spend far too much time sitting on my crack, jacking a box, right? So there's a guy, his name's Alan de Botton, and this is available on YouTube. He decided that rather than pursue a doctorate degree in philosophy, he was going to try to introduce philosophy to the masses so that they were better able to appreciate their world. He took some of the money that he made from selling some of his books and started something in England called the School of Life. So one of the videos that the School of Life put out is brief, and it asks the question, are you a good person?
Mm-hmm.
What the School of Life, that video says, is that the person who says yes to that question probably isn't.
Why is that? If you asked me that question, I'd say I was.
Well, what they present is that people who are really good people always have doubt, and they're always attempting to be a better person. They're always curious. They always want to know more about how they interact with their world. And I think there's something to be argued for the idea of uncertainty, science as we know it.
Well, if you have a lot of doubt and you doubt yourself and you doubt your country, you doubt your world, you're easily pushed around. You're easily led and pushed around.
It's not a lot of doubt. It's enough doubt to be curious.
Okay.
And last year, and I'll call it a mantra. Last year, the mantra "follow the science" emerged. Most people don't have an understanding of what science is. Science is not a subject. Science is a process.
Mm-hmm.
Science is also not unlike truth, in that the pursuit of truth is a process. And in that moment where someone becomes certain of their interaction, that person's as great a liability as the...
Hello? Are you there? Okay.
Or at least that's just my take on it. I probably read far more than I should. It don't work. I came to a conclusion after I got out of the military that the moment I trade my time for money, the government's going to be there asking for some of it.
Well,
so
that.
If I use my time to develop myself intellectually and emotionally, then when I do actually have to trade my time for money, I'll be better equipped. And because almost everything is available online now, there's no shortage of information.
No, there isn't. But not all of it's accurate, and a lot of it's opinion. And by the way, most of the important changes that have happened in our country in 70 years have been brought about by sociologists, sociological studies, including the Brown versus Board of Education study, including the gay rights study. I believe Chief Justice Cady was reading a lot of, then Chief Justice Cady was reading a lot of sociologists at Georgetown. At least I've heard that. And the point is sociologists like C. Wright Mills was a sociologist in the 40s and 50s, and he urged his fellow sociologists to be activists, essentially. So you cannot trust a sociological study because it's likely done by one of the people influenced by C. Wright Mills and his activist ideology. So again, these tremendous cultural and life changes are being changed, are bringing change to our lives, not because they're scientific fact. but because they're a sociological impression by an activist, usually. We're being fooled.
Of course we are. Of course we are. We're encouraged toward having some sort of deficiency. It's
Yeah.
easy for someone to introduce a product or an idea when each of us believes that there's something missing from our lives.
That's right. You're not Kevin Crimmins, are you? Because you sound a little like Kevin.
No, I've got ID here. I can check it for you.
What? Who am I speaking to?
I am sometimes the bane of, or used to be, the bane of the city council, or at least part of it. Jim Lloyd.
Hi, Jim.
Mike, how's it going?
I'm all right, man. I'm going out to Fort Dodge Ford here in a little bit and party down with them. 25 years. You ever bought a car from Fort Dodge Ford?
Dude, I haven't bought anything that I didn't actually absolutely have to have, which is primarily food, for the last 15 years.
All right. All right. You're not living out of the country in a tent or something, are you?
No. A nice old woman, before she moved on, whatever came next for her, said I should come out and stay in her house.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Jim, thanks a lot.
Have a good day.
You too, man. This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. It's 440.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.